Hi, everyone. As we jump into the section about what the textbook author calls the rhetorical shaping of gender, I wanted to make a short video about kind of why we're even talking about these two chapters and the subjects that are in these chapters. But first, I want to emphasize, because what's going to happen for a lot of students when they read that first chapter on competing images of women, you're going to be like, is this a chapter on feminism? And some of you will be like, yes. And some of you will be like, ah. So just know that don't let the first couple pages fool you. It's not a chapter on feminism. That would not be a bad thing. But that is also not really what the chapter's about. I mean, yeah, there's some feminist threads in here. They're undeniable. But that's not what this is about. So, what these two chapters are really about, and I think she separates them into women's movements and men's movements just because it's easier, which might be a little bit of a cop-out from my point of view. But anyway, what she's trying to do, what the textbook author is trying to do, and I think this is a smart move on her part, is give you a historical background about how we got to the place that we are today. And a historical background for what gender as a social construct means right now, because right now is a reflection of all the things that happened in the past. And she can't really do that without going back through history just a little bit. Obviously, it's like maybe 100 years of history. It's not that long if you really think about it. So there's a couple things that you should look for while you are going through these chapters. I want you to think about common themes and perspectives, because when you go through both the one that's competing images of women and competing images of men, you're going to notice that those two chapters, those movements, they have some common themes, and actually the men's movements echo the women's movements on some of those themes. I mean, I'll give you a big hint. One of them is reproductive rights. They both talk about that. Another one is violence, specifically violence against women, although I think that the modern conversation has evolved to include violence against anyone, gendered violence in general. So look for those common themes and see where you can see those connections, because that's going to help you understand why some of these movements are useful to look at for this class. I think also it's good to look at them in terms of reactions to each other. So some of the women's movements are reactions to other women's movements, and some of the men's movements are reactions to other men's movements, or the men's movements might be reaction to women's movements, and so on. So that's something I think is just really interesting, because if you can spot where the reactions are, you're like, oh, that's interesting. You know, you'll connect some of these dots when you get there. If you haven't already got there, you'll know what I mean. And again, I just think that it's really important to understand that the purpose of these couple chapters is to give us insight into where we were before. I mean, it really, I think it's been less than 100 years that women have had the right to vote in this country. That's really not that long. So all these movements have just progressed really, really quickly if you think about it in those terms. And it's a constant evolution, and the way we talk about gender has just gone right along with that. So these things also, you're going to look back on this at the end of the semester and understand why these two chapters were really useful and helpful for you, because she's setting up this theme in here that is so important to pay attention to as we move forward. And it's why I don't do these two chapters at the beginning, because you might not have been ready for this in week 3 or week 4. But hopefully you are now. She's setting up some themes about what it means to be marginalized, because you're going to start to see themes in, maybe not so much in the chapter on relationships, but in the chapter on the workplace or education. That's a great one, where we're going to talk about the way some people are marginalized as a result of our gender. And I don't just mean women. I mean men as well. Like if we think about the way little boys are marginalized in an educational setting, girls are at some disadvantages and boys are at some disadvantages, and those things are systemic. It's not because the girl walked in there or the boy walked in there less good. It's because the system wasn't set up or designed to help those people as well as it was to help other people. So that's actually really getting a good understanding of um, these marginalized groups or these issues where people have faced some oppression is a true purpose of learning about these movements, is to give you some historical idea. Plus, some of you are going to find this interesting. There's some movements that I had not heard of until I took a class very similar to this, and it's just interesting. So hopefully these movements will be insightful for you, and this video gives you a little bit of an idea of how to look at them and a good understanding.